You were at an Emmanuel Levinas conference in France recently. What really goes on there?
A lot goes on there.
Seriously, though, tell me about an Emmanuel Levinas conference.
It is rigorous scholarship and intellectual inquiry. It's fantastic.
What kind of people get into Emmanuel Levinas?
All sorts of people.
I know, but there must be like is there a common denominator of the people?
People who are concerned with ethics. There are a lot of people who are very socially aware. You get a lot of activist types.
Yeah.
There are definitely a few anarchists. We actually have one presenter who is kind of a crazy, reactionary, anarchist, provocateur kind of guy. He came wearing a T-shirt on which he had drawn a giant circle that said "Stop Israeli Apartheid," a big slash through it, and gave his presentation in that outfit as opposed to
That's an interesting choice.
wearing professional clothing. Yes. But then you've got people who are staunch supporters of Israel. Then you've got people who probably couldn't care less. I mean, it's all sorts of people. Anybody who's concerned with ethics and responsibility and, philosophical permutations of those ideas.
What percentage had gone to grad school?
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't imagine anyone who'd not gone to grad school
Unfortunately.
just being a
no.
huge Emmanuel Levinas fan.
He's too dense. Unfortunately.
And what were some of the discussions like? Maybe the discussions outside of the classroom, when people were maybe having a drink and talking about Levinas.
There was a lot of discussion on Israel. There was a lot of talk about flotilla. I got into a very heated debate with a group of scholars who are also friends. It was me against 3 or 4 of them. Then I realized one of them was actually on my side. We had an interesting debate that was very, very fiery, but then we all walked off together and were happy because it was Levinas that brought us together. So
I noticed that your Facebook page is like one of the last bastions of free inquiry and intellectual discourse on the entire internet. But what struck me is there's just so much intellectual fodder. And speaking of intellectual firepower, we have Casey now in the chat room.
Oh, Casey.
And so many intellectual lines of inquiry opening up on your Facebook page. But one that struck me was a discussion of Israel. And what I couldn't believe was how one friend of yours declared about another friend of yours, "You hate Jews." I mean, I was really, what kind of talk? It just didn't seem very intellectual. Like, suddenly there's this, like, very reasoned, polite discourse on Israel and ethics, and then one friend of yours just, like, from out of nowhere goes, "Well, this is just hard on those of you who hate Israel, hate Jews."
Yeah. That particular friend didn't want to have a dialogue.
That wasn't very dialogical.
No, it wasn't. He shut down the dialogue.
He basically shut down the thread.
Yes.
And everyone kind of stayed away.
He resorted to ad hominem attacks.
Yeah, what was up with that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I was that friend.
Yes, you were that friend.
And then you came in with a very reasoned and calm and moderate, like, 4-paragraph, like, a lot of work.
I did.
Because you had a crisis there. You had, like, one friend who was about to leave and said,
well, he
"I'm out of this."
His comments,
yeah, he withdrew his comments.
Yeah, unfortunately, and they were very, very long, very carefully well-written comments.
Yeah.
About Israel, about, all sorts of issues surrounding Israel, and I felt that he was being honest. I felt that he was sincerely looking for real dialogue about it, and he was shut down. I was really disappointed by that. Really, really disappointed, I have to say. But I don't know.
So do you think someone can think that Israel is an oppressive country and not be anti-Jewish?
Yes. I think it's possible to be critical of Israel, not anti-Israel, but critical of Israel and not be anti-Jewish and not be anti-Semitic.
Well, of course,
Absolutely.
everyone can criticize Israel, but to portray Israel as an oppressive society, can someone who views Israel as an oppressive society Can
To
they?
call it an oppressive society, I have a problem with that. But to say that the Israeli government has certain policies that ultimately are oppressive, I think that's different than saying
Yeah,
it's
that's
just
different.
downright
That's saying that
oppressive society.
the country is like, the country of Israel is, is bad.
Right. It's
Is
lumping
it-
everybody together. I mean, people have done that with Americans. They've identified all Americans with, the former Bush administration's policies. And that's just not the case. I think Israel, like America, is full of people who think all sorts of different things and have different opinions and different ideas on how things should be. It is a democracy in ways that other countries in that region are not.
Can someone say Israel doesn't have a right to exist as a Jewish state and not be anti-Jewish?
It's possible, but I think 9 times out of 10 there's some anti-Semitism happening there. And I think they're just using it as a vehicle to express it most of the time.
So, I mean, neither you or I are like proud of what happened on the flotilla. We went like high-fiving each other and going, yeah, we gunned down 9 activists. Like, no Jews were
it's
proud.
It's a tragedy,
but we're not proud of what happened, but we're not ashamed either. It's like it was a messy situation. But I mean, how do you stay friends with people who view that as like an example of Israeli evil?
Well, I mean, I posted an article on Facebook about this. I think it was
from Shmuel Rosner on Slate.com. Yeah, a very commonsensical article.
Right. Where
Don't be
he literally
proud,
says,
don't
this
be
is
ashamed.
terrible. It's terrible
this
that
is real
lives
life.
were lost. But
Yeah.
these soldiers did what any soldier should and would do in such a situation. I mean, obviously there are problems with, the intelligence that preceded the whole, rappelling down under the flotilla. But, I mean, in terms of what happened there, I think it's just another opportunity to demonize Israel.
So what do you do when you encounter colleagues who do demonize Israel? I mean, you obviously still talk to them and maintain...
There are a lot of people I won't engage with because
Yeah.
sometimes the hatred is so
Yeah.
venomous
Yeah.
that you know that you can't engage them. I have a couple scholar friends like that. I just don't get into the discussion with them because it's revolting. These scholars happen to be Jewish too.
Yeah.
I find that a lot of the worst
anti-Jewish sentiments out there comes from Jews.
Yeah.
And most of the strongest supporters of Israel in the United States are Christians.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is all very bizarre, because like if there was another Holocaust, the Jews would be the ones going up the chimneys, and Israel would be the safety hatch. But what I found is that people who are rooted in a tradition respect other people who are rooted in a tradition. So like traditional Italians, traditional Roman Catholics, traditional evangelical Protestants, they respect people who are rooted in their Jewish identity, their Judaism, their allegiance to the survival of their people and to their nation and state of Israel. But people who kind of reject traditional ties, many of whom go into academia, many of whom get graduate degrees and create a new life for themselves in academia by rejecting the kind of the hidebound traditional things that would tie people to a certain way of looking at life. They are the ones who are most uncomfortable with Christians who are rooted in Christianity or Jews who are rooted in a Jewish identity and Jewish state.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's a very strange position to be in. As somebody who, is religious or respects or appreciates ritual, but to be in the context of academia, of the university, of intellectual discourse, which so often seems to either butt up against at the very least or reject at the very worst any of those kinds of sentiments.
Chapter 17, verse 1, don't slaughter for God anything in which there's a blemish, any bad thing. Like, there's a very particular God, the God of the Torah. He doesn't want you to to give him.